Hey, this is Russ Perry, CEO and founder of Design Pickle. If you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruptions as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend Denis Giannoutzos.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Giannoutzos.
Hey, welcome to the show, Leadership is Changing. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Leaders everywhere confront similar obstacles because people are people, but everywhere you go, leaders are overwhelmed, disrupted, and under pressure. They run from email to email, meeting to meeting. Many leaders are not changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind. The purpose of the show is taking our listeners' leadership to another level by finding their balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. I believe we don't have enough effective leaders in the world today, and if we can get the leaders to step up and lead change, then they can inspire real change. Hey listeners, it's now time to adapt in our fast-moving world. Hey listeners, if you haven't already checked out the Facebook group Leadership is Changing, go ahead and do that. And if you're on LinkedIn, there is a page there, Leadership is Changing. So when I started my business a few years ago, I wanted to get a whole lot of design stuff done, and I've been using this service called Design Pickle. And today I have a guest with me. His name is Russ Perry. He's the founder and CEO of Design Pickle, the leading flat-rate graphic design and creative services company. And under his leadership, Design Pickle has grown from 2 to over 600 team members globally, completing over 950,000 creative requests since its 2015 inception. Russ resides in Scottsdale, Arizona. Lovely place. I love that whole place, with his wife and his 3 daughters. So, Russ, hey, welcome to today's show.
Thank you for having me, Denis. Super excited to be chatting with you.
Yeah, awesome. So I've just given our listeners a brief introduction to you. Is there anything else that you want to share with us about your background?
How much time do you have, man? I've written a whole book about it. No, I mean, thanks for having me. I think what's funny is Design Pickle started out. There was no Design Pickle when I started it, and it was for me solving my own business problems, just like yourself. I needed design help. I was trying to find a solution that fit my budget, fit the quality, and it was frustrating. It was challenging, and I always relish, pun intended, there's a lot of pickle puns in my world. I always relish in the knowledge that Design Pickle was I was the first client, I was the first client of the service. We didn't have the brand at that point, but I found a way to put together a team virtually, a team that was responsive, a team that was affordable, and ran my consulting business on the bones of Design Pickle, like the first generation of it, for a good 90, 120 days until I finally kind of had that, hey, wait a minute, maybe other people might actually need this as well, and kind of kicked it off from there. Last month, January 2021, was our 6-year birthday. So we've been now doing this for over 6 years, technically.
Oh, awesome. Happy birthday. I mean, that's wonderful. And 6 years. Amazing how that time has gone by so quickly as well. And, that's great that you looked at wanting to solve your own business problem, and then found a solution, but then also offering it up to others as well, which is brilliant. Hey, Russ, how have you gone into leadership? I mean, tell us a little bit more about that.
So I was just on a one-on-one with one of my engineers this morning, and we were talking about this exact topic. And
Hmm.
I will actually go back to before Design Pickle, 2014. I had lost everything I had known as an entrepreneur. I had a creative agency for 8.5 years. I closed it with my business partner. And for the listeners out there, closing your business is worse than losing your business. It's definitely worse
Hmm.
than selling your business. I say closing your business is like putting your pet to sleep. It's like putting down the thing that you love and you care about, but it's horrible. It's horrible because there's no big story. It's pretty anticlimactic, to be honest. And at that point I realized I needed an upgrade of my operating system, of the Russ Perry operating system. I had
Mm.
been on a treadmill for 8.5 years, and I wasn't about to go for another 8.5 years with that same OS in my brain and in my heart. I needed a change, and I didn't really know where to begin. So here in Arizona, there's a lot of events in normal times. There's a lot of personal development. There's companies that have their offices here. So I reached out to my network, and I vividly remember my very, 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 very first leadership training, personal development conference. It was everything in one. My friend Vanessa Shaw is her name. She was hosting it, and she didn't brand it as this, but it was actually basically a women's conference. But she didn't say that, and so I show up, it's me, maybe
Oh,
one
wow.
other guy, and her husband, who's, like, running the AV and the tech, and it was transformational, and it was the first time since I could remember I was working on myself, and I was thinking about that, and I was building that, and so I was addicted. I was addicted at that point to leadership. I was addicted to personal development because I recognized that so much of my limitations ahead were limitations of just my belief system, or limitations of my confidence, or limitations of my network and who I know and where we're at. And this study, this path that I was on, was shattering those time after time after time. And they started small. Like, I remember one of the first goals that I had was to spend a summer, like 3 or 4 weeks in California. Like, that was my big
Mm.
goal. Like, we had never done a beach vacation before. And so I wrote it down and I worked on it for like 3 to 4 months, and we did it. And we had this great experience, which, for me at the time, was the biggest thing I'd ever done. Was this really, we had a home, we could wasn't on the beach, but we could walk there in about 10 minutes. And so anyway, like, that has just been the pattern now. Is when I think about leadership, I think about, what am I doing to upgrade my operating system? What am I doing to grow so that my capabilities are matching my vision?
Awesome. What am I doing to upgrade my operating system? I love that. I love that. And that last piece you said about your vision and your goals, is that what you said?
Yeah, so, like, my goals have always been, my vision and my goals have always been huge, but my capabilities have not always been
Ah.
equal to match. So that's what I look at in terms of leadership. Is you're upgrading your skill sets to match that great destination that we all have. So if you're not doing that, you could have the biggest vision in the world, but that's all it's going to be, is just a vision.
Yeah, isn't it? It's really interesting to see that, and the fact that whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're in a large corporate, it doesn't matter. If you're not out there developing yourselves, listeners, it's really important that we do that for the 6 inches between your ears, what I call, the attitude gap, that the operating system probably is what you're saying here, Russ, which is really important. But if you can align your capabilities to those goals and vision, and then help, that'd be wonderful. And I think a lot of leaders don't do that, and they just hope for the best and see where things are going.
Well, and there's some ego at play too that you have to get through, especially if you've had success in the past, or you achieved relatively quickly. You either hang on to that success thinking, "Hey, I've done it before, I can do it again." Or if you're in the middle of it, you're currently, at that point where things are going great, everything's aligned. If it's not broken, don't try to fix it, kind of mentality. But there is that ego, and I had to battle that. I had to beat my ego down to nothing to say, "Look, I am willing to learn. I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to hire others and invest in coaches and training programs and do these things." And maybe not 100% of everything you have to take on, but it finally allowed me to be humble enough to open that door of growth up. And I see that a lot with leaders. Probably less so for your current listeners, because the people probably listening to this are open, but maybe, someone, there's a friend, and there, when that door is slammed shut, yeah, things might go for a bit, but then there's an awakening, or a wall that you hit. And the question is do you put that ego aside, and are you willing to learn? Are you willing to grow? Are you willing to be guided by someone else?
Yeah, that is huge. absolutely huge. Of course, the listeners here are on that path of learning, of course.
They're the most elite of them all,
Oh,
enlightened of them
that's
all, I'm
awesome.
sure.
Yeah, cool. Hey, Russ, thank you for that. So, this person could be alive or from history. Now, who's your favorite leader and why?
Wow, that's a great question. It's really recent, and this answer may change, but I just finished part 1 of Barack Obama's memoir, and it was really impactful. I just turned 38 last month also, and so most of his presidency was a time I remember really well. And in fact, reading through what he went through, the national crises, the policies that were passed, it was hard, like, yeah, he was successful in some regards, but there were so many challenges after challenges after challenges. And I think for me, why I'm picking him is because his book was so eloquent and humble and modest around it. And that's the kind of leader that I want to be. That's the kind of leader that I want my kids to grow up and see. And maybe his impact was limited to 8 years in, the United States. It's not like, Jesus or Gandhi or, some global person who's had generational impact, but that's relevant, it's recent, and I think it's a really great modern example of what leadership is. It's not about self, it's not about personal interests, it's about doing what's the best. And in this book, there were often no right answers. Like, there were often no clear answers of where to go. Like, the choices were all bad choices, and someone still had to make those choices and decide where it's at. And having that integrity, having that intent, that's what I took away from that book. And I'm a avid reader, I read all the time. It was just one of the best written books I've ever read. And I didn't really know this, but he's an author. Like, he's written books before he was a president. So it was really cool, and it was really cool to get the, like, inside scoop of all these things that were going on during that time.
Yeah, it's interesting how we can learn so much more about people if we actually take the time out to do that. And also, because we see a lot in the media, and the media will portray things certain ways and things like that, or we will listen to other people based on what they have, their views and their opinions, which is really gossip, but it may not be very well informed. But then when you do read books, things like that, that's really interesting to see, and you can learn so much from it. Hey, the show is called Leadership is Changing, and that title there, when I was recovering from having the tumor removed, this is one of the ideas that popped into my head, and so it was like, wow. And so, leadership is changing. When I say that title, what does that mean for you?
I mean, we've talked a lot already in just the few minutes we've started here about that hunger for growth. And I believe that is one of the hallmarks of successful leaders today, is their ability to adapt and grow. My business is not exempt from change. And I think every business today, the first 20 years of their business, things are changing. The dynamics, the economies, the people, the technology, all of that. And that is unique. I mean, if you think of leaders of the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, they were leading companies that were very monolithic. They were very slow to innovate. Innovations came from companies like GE. They came from companies like, Hewlett Packard and Bell, or Hewlett Packard and I was going to say Bell, Dell, and, like the tech companies. But now those innovations can happen with two guys and some software coming out of wherever, middle of nowhere. So the ability to change as a leader is the most critical function, I believe, in terms of being a successful leader. And, like, so leadership is changing is, to me, when I hear that, is it's like that's job requirement number 1 for a leader, is to being able to navigate that and to be comfortable with it. I'm excited for it. I again, I'll talk. I was just on one-on-ones with my engineering team, and we were talking about some technology that we're working that's 2, 3, 4 years out. But this technology is like, like, uh, I'll share a little bit, but, disclaimer, this is not happening anytime soon if you're a Design Pickle client. Like, predictive algorithms to match you with the best creative. That's all done right now kind of by hand. Like, we do a lot of that manually, but there's no reason why we can't look at your brand, we can't look at the past work of a creative. We can't look at this new layer of machine learning inside our technology to do that at scale and do it in a way that sees success in the creative process. To me, that's change. And I'm like stoked, like I'm really excited. Other leaders might be like, no, 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 no. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. And, that's obviously not the path that I recommend.
Yeah, and what I really like about that is the fact that there is a lot of people, leaders like that, as you said, they don't want to do it. They want to stay in their comfort zone. We're okay. But then, like in my introduction, if they're not changing quick enough, then they're becoming irrelevant and being left behind. Now, you're talking about 4 years, maybe longer out there in the future, which is fantastic. So you're starting to think about the future, but it starts now. And what I always say, Russ, is that wherever you are today in life, whether it be in a leadership role, whatever you've done, it's based on what you've done in the last 5 years. And
Mhm.
so what you're doing now is setting yourself up for the future, which is beautiful to see as well. And you touched on the play on the topic just a little bit then about industry and business changing and so forth. So how has your business or industry changed, and what sort of pressures is that or demands has it put on you and your leadership team?
Well, we kind of stumbled across this over the last few years. When we started, it really was just we just wanted people to find creatives, right? Like there wasn't some big master plan on changing the world, just solving more problems that I had. But what has emerged, and I think we're really bullish on, is this kind of new model of workforce. And to help explain it, you kind of got to go back in history. So, like the very first way you found help was you hired an employee. Most modern businesses, you hired an employee, and that worked. And then the next phase was like agencies, like, hey, here's a collection of folks that are very specific to what you need, like a creative agency or a technology agency, and you can hire them to solve these specific problems. And then the internet, like freelancers and freelancing came around because now I can work from Bali and I can do whatever I want. And then tech got layered onto freelancing, and that's where we found like the gig economy. It was like, hey, now if we optimize these workforces with tech, problem is the gig economy has really just been focused on like low skilled work, driving, delivery, jobs that aren't creative. They aren't like these more technical roles. And so what we've really leaned into and where we're headed is, the creative industry, and what I'm in is moving towards what we're doing is like this subscription model. We're calling it the subscription workforce, where you can have the flexibility of like a gig economy, but you have the work and the quality and the dynamic nature like software, where you can scale it, you can build your perfect team of people. They can be one or 100, and there's this elasticity in it. Not to mention, a base layer of competence and skill set, and the roles that your business requires. So it's this next, like, what's after gig economy. We're predicting it's subscription workforce, and we're going to see it happen in our space, obviously, because we're pushing it. But I believe you'll be able to do this in legal, accounting. There's going to be so many like high knowledge roles that make the leap, and you can't make the leap with gig, because a lawyer needs a job. A lawyer wants a job. A lawyer doesn't want to be on a marketplace trying to figure out where their next check is going to come from, or
Yeah.
waiting in an app like, hey, ding, legal brief. Okay, I'm going to review it. Like they want that consistency. And that's what
Yeah.
that subscription workforce provides, is that layer of consistency for both the provider, or the client, and the provider.
That sounds so exciting.
I agree.
The subscription workforce, that it sounds very exciting. When we moved to this city, and about a couple of years ago, we actually moved here 4 years ago, and then about 2 years ago, we moved to a new house. And I was walking around the neighborhood, and I was going, "Oh, they're going on about this workforce from home and all that sort of stuff." Thinking, "Oh, that's just marketing crap. Here we go." And I started counting all the houses with the signs of businesses at home, and I was like, I stopped at 48. I was just like, "Okay, all
Yeah.
right, maybe it's working." And I think what we've seen as well with the pandemic and so forth, it's just pushed it so much quicker. It's really accelerated everything to happen. And I think that we have to think about the way that we work, and we work differently, and move with it. And I think it's really great. And those leaders who are going to be on the cutting edge to make it happen are really going to be the ones that are going to be out there in the future.
Yeah, and I don't think it's overly complicated either. I mean, I don't think like Like, that's what's kinda cool about this. I mean, obviously, COVID has been crappy. Well, for New Zealand, you guys handled it, Australia too. We're still figuring things. We're still like, do we like, I think people
Right.
still don't believe in it here at some point. But, like, the point is, like, I think people will come out of this, like, super excited about all these changes. Like, these aren't the changes that are going to be negative in the long run. It's like, wow, I realized how much inefficiencies were in our business, and we kind of rinsed that away. I'll give you an example. Our office that we're in today, we have a physical office. It's me, 3 or 4 other folks that have basically just come here throughout. It's a decent size office. I'd say, 6,500 square feet, so a little over, you know, 1,500, square meters, and, like, point about it is we will never outgrow this office now, because what we decided during COVID is that
Mm.
we are a remote company. So we continue to have this and cool space and technology and streaming, and the people in Arizona can visit, but it's not a come to work place, so we won't need desks for our growing team, and I'm stoked because we were about to outgrow this space in February of 2019. I had a $100,000 purchase order for new furniture that I forgot to sign until March, and then I definitely wasn't signing it.
That's a good
So
thing you
these
forgot that.
Exactly. So these changes, I predict people are gonna be really excited about, and there'll be some bumps in the road. I think there's still tons of value meeting in person, but it's not gonna be this, "We must do work the same way we've done it the last 30 years."
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, look, you've talked about various things in the future as a leader. Now, if there was one thing that you could change in business as a leader today, what would that one thing be today?
As a leader, I think it would be making sure kids get real business education earlier on in life. I made so many mistakes thinking that my path was to go to college and get a job and do that. And then when I started my own business, I didn't even know what a profit and loss statement was. I didn't know what a balance sheet was. And there are tons of really cool programs out there, extracurricular programs, but I think there is such a missing gap of entrepreneurial business knowledge that needs to be more prevalent in, similar with art and PE and like these fundamental things. And it's not to say everyone needs to go start their own business, but even if you work inside of one, if you have that foundational understanding, you can make better choices of where you work. You can make better life choices of the decisions around that. You can make better impact, have more success, maybe go and do your own thing. So I mean, I have young kids, so I think about that aspect quite a bit. And yeah, so I mean, that's that's my idealistic answer for you.
Wow, I think that's wonderful, and I think it's a great idea because there is. I wish there was that kind of thing. I mean, I did had to learn at the age of 7 because we grew up in the coffee industry, and so we were thrown into it after school during holidays, and that we learnt our work ethics, our skills, and all that from actually doing the business with our parents, which was pretty cool to
Nice.
do. Which is
Do you
one.
still have that business or do they?
No. So my parents sold, they've been in it 60 years in the industry, but they sold their cafe. They had several cafes, but then my brother's gone and taken that brand, created his own brand and has taken his coffee business now into other countries, into the US, into Chicago. 35
Wow.
stores he's got, I think, here and maybe 28 in New Zealand. And there's some in Japan. I think one in China and the US, which is great. So just to see that. And then I've
It
got,
worked. Your parents' plans worked.
Oh, absolutely. And then I've got a brand as well if I want to as a backup. But,
Yeah.
I love what I do around leadership and all that side of things. But I think, coming back to what you said around the business knowledge and learning that as kids, I think that'd be wonderful to do and a good life skill to help what you said before about the goals, the vision, the capability, and marrying that together. What a great way to
Mhm.
start and starting it really early, which is really good. Now, you've grown your company from 2 to 600 staff since you're actually team members, as you call it globally, since you started in 2015. Employees, what are their expectations of leaders? Has that changed at all?
I don't have a lot of data on this question, but I will say because I don't ask them. I don't ask them that. I'm not the employee. But I will say, I think that generally speaking, and talking with team members, talking with my other colleagues who have businesses, that employees expect their leaders to be a lot more real and
Mm.
authentic. They expect them to be able to have candid conversations, to come down with them and meet them wherever they're at. And the rigid hierarchy, while might exist in, again, I have a limited data set, and I didn't I didn't work in like for a big brand like yourself in the past, but I actually worked for Apple, but it was a brief period of time. But like we believe that there's an order and structure to the org chart for communication and teams and efficiencies and project management, but that's not a hierarchical order of importance. It's not like, hey, if that person is a director or a VP, they're not accessible. And I think that's just, people want that environment now. Coming to work, you don't want to work in this environment where you feel like you got to watch over your shoulder, or if so you're, oh, thank you for your time. Thank you for meeting with me. I mean, I don't have a lot of free time in general, but I will make
Yep.
whatever time I can for my team. So, maybe I'm a use case of one at Design Pickle, but I think that's a fair generalization, that access, not just from time, but emotion and vulnerability and what's hard and what's challenging and what's working and what's not working. Teams want to know that. Even if it's tough, you got to give it to them. And so that's the way I approach it. And I approached it through all of the craziness of 2020 and continue to, as we move ahead.
I think you're right. I mean, that's whether it's a CEO of a large corporate, medium sized, doesn't matter. Entrepreneurs, business owners, they're all saying the same thing, Russ. They're all saying they need to be real and authentic. Having that candid discussion, as you said, I think is really
Mhm.
important. And I like the other one, which is being vulnerable. And if you can bring the human side into it and being vulnerable in that, people are going to go, wow, this guy really gets it. And he doesn't have the big ego and doesn't really care about people. He does really care about us as people, whether we are in a subscription workforce or whether we're in an employee.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, they're all human beings, right? And they want to be treated well. Yeah. So in this fast-paced, ever-changing world, what makes a leader successful today?
Well, we've hit on a few of them, the authenticity, we've hit on the growth and that personal development. I like to think about, success as a measurement of kind of freedom of time. And to me, if your business is not being designed in a way that allows yourself and your other leaders to work on the business and not just in the business, then you're robbing them of massive success. So, like, I'm a systems and operations guy. It's probably no surprise. You're a client. You understand how that works. But the reason that we've had so much success around it is because our systems give us the time to innovate. Our systems give us the space to, take 2 days off site and work together as a leadership team. And so, for me, it's a boring answer, but it's like you got to have a business that runs without you. You got to have a business that is producing something
Mm,
and documentation and training and all of that. And the reason that works so much down the road is because when you are able to step away, you can take advantage of these fast-paced changes. You can recognize them, you can look ahead, you can look out, you can see what's coming down the pipe. And so if you are not protecting your time, you're always in the weeds, you're not creating that space for your leaders, you get blindsided. You can't innovate, you can't create, you're just doing it for the now. So, that has been, I mean, I have a
right.
personal, like, hobby, I guess you could call it, of time management, and I'm always reading books and planners and all sorts of random things, but I do that as a skill set so that I can be a better leader.
Excellent. Wow, that's awesome. So, and I know you've been talking about the future and all that side of things. I want to bring this last question here for you, which is, where do you see leadership being in 5 years? I know you've talked about technology and you talked about businesses and the workforce and that, but where do you see leadership being in 5 years?
I Okay, I'm gonna go out on a limb here. This might go against things we've just said even in this interview. I think there is gonna be a retraction a reaction, if you will, to this flat organizational structure, everyone's equal, kumbaya kind of vibe. And I feel like people are going to start leaning towards more definition, more specialization, more really nuanced roles, and wanting leaders who can help them just be performers. You know, I feel like the future workforces actually, again, we don't have enough time to go into it. I'm pretty opinionated on it, but I think there'll be less leaders emerging over the next 5 years. Too much Fortnite. And the reason is because, and out of that, they will require people who can really lead them and get them focused, get them clear on what they want. You'll have a really talented workforce who won't have any ambition or as much as we've seen over, the earlier generations. So leaders are going to have to be very clear with their own goals, with what they're looking for, and being able to assemble teams to get there. But I do think there is going to be a leadership gap that we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years. That's going to be major, and it's going to require those that do want to lead to be very, very precision operators in how they get the results they're looking for.
Wow, that is music to my ears. Being an executive coach, leadership development, team signing kind of guy, I'm like, yes, that's awesome. But I agree. I think even today, I think there's a gap, and I even think it'll become bigger. And but we will need to work differently as well, which is great.
Can I rant for 1 second? Do we
Go
have
for
a
it.
minute for a rant?
Go for it.
Like teenagers who don't want to get their driver's permit and drive. Like, I can't understand that.
Right.
Like, to me, like, that's independence, that's leadership, that's wanting to go and do your own thing. And like, those are the leading indicators that I'm tracking to back up my statement, is that we have a whole generation of people who just want to sit around and consume content. They're not wanting to push and push and push. So anyway, end of rant. That wasn't that big of a rant.
No, it wasn't. But I like what you're saying, because I think for me, that is, you're calling it, that's leadership as well, which I agree. But I also think it's freedom.
Yeah.
That gives them so much freedom, so many more options if they just get their license and they can go and do what they want to go and do. But yeah, it's all wonderful. Hey, so that's excellent. Russ, thank you for joining us on today's show. If our listeners are wanting to get hold of you, where should they go?
So I invite everyone to join my very infrequent newsletter. It's comes out for me personally, so you can just hit reply on that, and it's called Under the Lid, like the pickle jar lid, and you can go to designpickle.com/under and get signed up for that.
Excellent. Well, Russ, once again, thank you so much for joining us on today's show.
Hey, I loved it, by the way, and thank you for talking about this topic. I actually am on a lot of podcasts, and not a lot of people are talking about leadership. So I think this has been super enjoyable.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey, listeners, what we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Change is incredibly scary, especially with the unknown and the unfamiliar territory. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing. Hey, look out for the episodes as they've been released. Download them, have a listen, put a review and a rating, and share them with your friends, your family, your network. Hey, if there's any feedback you'd like to give me, or if there's a question for my guests as I interview them, or a question for the freestyle episode, which is Ask Denis, send me an email, dennis@leadingchangepartners.com. Hey, listeners, the other thing I'm going to do is in the show notes is I want to put a offer for you around Design Pickle. I'm going to put my affiliate link there to give you a credit if you go ahead and look at Design Pickle. I'm really, really going to encourage you to check it out. I'm loving it, and I think it'd be a great thing for you to do. So go ahead and check out that link as well. Hey, listeners, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.